introductions very brief. You have already heard and seen Jan Philipp Albrecht yesterday, and we're delighted that he's here, and he's been, as Petra was working for the EC, well, Jan was actually a member of the European Parliament for 9 years, before then becoming a minister in Schleswig-Holstein and now being at the head of the Heinrich Foundation. Patricia McKenna was also a member of the European Parliament a little bit before Jan, just a few years, and being elected actually, I believe, after Petra's death.
2 years after.
2 years after her death, and the first Green MEP for Ireland, and has been very active, but left the Green Party, I think, 2009, and but is qualified barrister. And Doris Metz, of course, fantastic film producer, journalist, editor, and making simply wonderful documentaries and being well known for them. And in many ways, this fantastic panel that we have here is symbolizing a number of really important parts of who Petra Kelly was and what she can still mean to us today. And I would like to start with Doris, not only because she sits next to me, but because she actually made the film. Why this film now? Why this film act now? I mean, I thought it was very striking that it wasn't just like a documentary about her life, but you framed it within the present and in the future. So over to you.
Thank you. I think...
Very close.
Close?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. For me, it was Petra Kelly and her energy and her power has to be in the film. So it was one of the first decisions not to present her like something in the past, gone, because we need her energy now and in the future. And I thought a personality like her, you can't put in a box and close it, you know, because after being murdered, she disappeared. So this was the biggest wish to bring with the film, to bring her back to reality, to the to people and in the memory, in our memory. Because even in Germany, it's the young generation, they didn't know the name Petra Kelly. They always are asking, there is a funny pop family, the Kelly family. Mm-hmm. So I was asked, was she part of the Kelly family? So, and my idea was, because she is, with all her political thinking, so part of the present and so actual, it's real. I mean, it's not from yesterday. So to bring her in our times with all her thoughts, it's so far-headed and so far-sighted. So this was the beginning of the film. And the idea to start in the present and to end in the presence. And so this was the idea of framing to bring her back to life, to us all.
And very successfully so. I'll come to Ireland last but not least. Jan, I would like you to kind of give us a little bit of where do you see Petra Kelly now? I mean, I remember some discussions at some stage that the Heinrich Foundation was actually possibly being called Petra Kelly Foundation. So can you tell us a bit more about the kind of past and present political framework where you see her, maybe even within the EU?
As someone who started being politically active after Eva was dead, it's hard to really say what Eva,
Petra.
Eva. I just wanted to talk about Eva, but yeah, what Petra would mean now today for the political debate. So therefore, I'm very thankful also for the documentary and also for brought back into discussing the way how she does politics and did politics by people like Eva Christop and also Lukas Beckmann, who are in a perfect better, or would be in a perfect better situation to explain this to you, and also to talk about the question on the table when the foundation was founded, which name to pick, for example. But on the other side, I have to say, on the one side, I think it is very important to really look at the way how Petra Kelly was politically active and founded the Green Party, for example, and brought forward political activism in very important fields like human rights or ecological politics. But on the other side, I think it's also important to see that it's not about one person, and that's also something she has brought forward. It's about the individual and each and every one, as I also mentioned yesterday, and the way how we get empowered to do something about the situation in which we are. So very often, I think this is about the question, how can we activate people to really start political thinking and political activism themselves, rather to telling people that it is about a certain political position or a certain political opinion which is to be followed, for example. And I think that's the most important today when we talk about thinking of Petra Kelly in today's time. It's not about the position you take, but about the inner understanding that it's about you to get engaged and that it's about you to be true to your own perspective and what you see and to speak it out and to accept that there's others also with strong opinions and that you can debate and can get active by accepting that there's also different perspectives and experiences. And I think that's very important today.
And I think that became very clear also in the film, that she was very clearly stating different opinions and not holding back with criticism. And I was particularly impressed by her encounter with Honecker, but that there was respect at the same time. There was not holding back of any criticism, but in a way that you could continue and that he clearly respected as well. And I also think it's kind of keeping in mind Heinrich Böll, this kind of Einmischung erwünscht, kind of we wish for engagement. This is very much where they're aligned. Patricia, you were a friend of hers, you were a political ally. Can you tell us a little bit more about Petra Kelly and Ireland? And it's wonderful that you brought some photos here with you, and we have her in the background. Patricia, what do you?
Thank you. Yeah, the photographs up here, my friend, colleague Grattan Healy, took those in 1989 at the Hiroshima Day memorial service in Dublin in Marion Square. And the photographs, a lot of them would be former Green Party colleagues of my own who I have since departed. Like everything else, they've departed their principles, so I had to depart from them. But Petra, well, she was involved back at the Carnsore Point campaign when the Irish government proposed, or it was actually Des O'Malley, a former minister, who proposed building a nuclear power plant at Carnsore Point, and Petra came over and got very involved in that campaign. She was also worked very closely with, I saw Carroll, he was a trade union guy. But she always kept up her contact with Ireland, even during her time in when she got elected to the Bundestag. And then in 1987, we had an issue of having to ratify what was the EU treaty, that was the Single European Act. Now, that was the first time that foreign policy and all of the military aspects were brought in to the EU. And after we were very heavily involved in that campaign, myself and Grattan, in opposing that treaty, because we could see the writing on the wall that Europe was going down this road of militarisation. And for us as a neutral country, and you'll notice a lot of the pictures up there, there'll be nuclear-free zone and neutrality and all, that was a big issue for us. And in 1989, we decided I was coordinator of the Irish Green Party at the time, which was called Cointus Last, and we decided at the time we were going to run an independent candidate, which was a man called Raymond Crotty, who was the guy who challenged the ratification of this EU treaty in the Supreme Court in Ireland successfully. So they had to hold a referendum. So he was going to run as a candidate in Dublin, and then in the southern part of the country, Joe Noonan, a solicitor who wrote an excellent book later on the militarisation of Europe. He was running in Cork. Now, I also had an image of him because we invited Petra over. This just goes to show, I just want to give you an example of how Petra, she was committed to the issues that she firmly believed in and wanted to change the world, and she would support people who were on that same page. Now, we asked her to come over and support the Crotty campaign and the Noonan campaign, and of course the Greens were asking her to come over for the campaign for the Green Party, because they decided at the end they'd run a campaign, and so I took sort of leave of absence. But she came over to Dublin, and it was a hoo-ha at the airport because my former colleague John Gormley, they felt, no, Petra Kelly is a German Green. She's here for the Greens Party. It has to be the Greens. And she was supporting Joe Noonan and Crotty, etc. And Petra just laid the law down very quickly and said, no, nobody owns me. I will decide who I will support, and if I believe in the people, their cause, I will support them. So and the reason she was supporting, well, the Greens and Crotty and Noonan, was on the issue of EU militarisation, because at that stage things had moved a little bit further in '89 from the Single European Act, where there was negotiations going on at an EU level to move further with the militarisation of Europe. And Petra could see this. She could see it quite clearly. And I'll give you another, the last conversation I had with her was a few years later at the G7 in Munich this was just in July of 1992, shortly before she was murdered. And I met her, we met there, and I was explaining to her, because I had just a month before that lost a Supreme Court challenge, or a High Court challenge against the government, who were pushing with propaganda for us to ratify what was the Maastricht Treaty. Now, the Maastricht Treaty was a treaty that Joe Noonan, of course, wrote an excellent book on, showing how this paves the way for the militarisation of Europe. And I don't think anyone can deny that now. If you look at what the Greens are doing in Europe, you look at what all the Greens in Europe are doing, they're supporting the militarisation of Europe, and Europe has moved so far away from being a sort of a peace or an organisation that was going to be working for a better world, the kind of world that Petra Kelly wanted. And Petra Kelly never, and this, I have to say, your quotes in that, the film was just brilliant. There was some really good stuff there. And if I could just mention, one of the things when they got elected to the Bundestag first, she was deriding her colleagues about they were basically falling for this kind of, they were seduced by all this pomp and circumstances that surrounded being members of the Bundestag. And that's exactly, I could see that when I was elected to the European Parliament, but she could see that straight away, and she had no time for it. She was really working for what she believed in, and she could see that they were all just basically, and to a certain extent it was also, I think, maybe a male thing. And they didn't like the fact that she was a very independent woman with an independent decision. This description of being hysterical and things like that, people used to call, or even in Ireland, they said that Petra Kelly, like she spoke like a machine gun, because she had so many things she wanted to talk about. Thank you. It maybe wasn't the right description, but she did. And she wanted to get everything out. She had so much she wanted to tell. So she spoke to a certain extent. She delivered like a machine gun. It was coming out without stopping. And people didn't like her strength. And the same goes, and the Greens, and I could see how they were pushing her out, didn't select her, because they didn't like strong women. And I have colleagues here, my friend who invited me to come to this today, John McHugh, his daughter was a candidate for the Greens and did very, very well. Saoirse McHugh, another very independent, strong woman. And of course, the same fate befell her as befell me and other female members of the Greens. But the key thing about Petra was that I believe, and another quote that you mentioned was just in relation to Russia, and she made some very, very significant comments there in relation to the number of Russian people who died in the Second World War, and about, this rewriting of history. We really have to remember what's going on. And she was working for peace. And if we look even in this country at what's going on even at the moment, where our own President Michael D. Higgins and his wife, when the Russian-Ukraine war broke out, they were looking for us to go down the road of peace. And President Michael D.'s wife was criticised in the media for actually saying this. And this is what we have to do. We have to work within international law to try and create peace, and that's what Petra was actually trying to do. But what I have to say, I suppose I better finish on this, but like she really came anytime we wanted her. She came over. As I said, the last time I spoke to her, sadly, was in July 1992 in Munich, and I was speaking to her about the Maastricht Treaty and about the fact that I'd lost that court case, which of course I came back with later in 95 or something, and I won it in the Supreme Court. But she was pointing out, she could see it, and she was actually telling me, I think she also mentioned she was getting some award, but I just don't remember. There was some award she was nominated for or something in 1992 in July. But she was very, so when they talk about a joint suicide, which is what I heard as well first when I heard that Petra was dead, that it was a joint suicide, which clearly it wasn't. It just begs the question, why did they come out with this conclusion so quickly? And how can somebody commit suicide if they're asleep when they're shot? But she was full of energy at that point, and that's why I firmly believe there was no way that woman had anything else in her head but the intention to go forward. And I think if she was alive today, but we don't know, she would definitely not be supporting the kind of world that we have at this moment, where the so-called peace activists within the Greens have turned to become hawks and to support military. Petra also came over and she signed, and I'll finish on this, she always came anytime we asked her. She was coming to the 1990 EU summit. We organised an alternative EU summit in 1990 to try and push the issue of what was happening in Europe in relation to Fortress Europe and in relation to militarisation. And unfortunately, she got mugged in Barcelona and couldn't attend. She was our German representative. And the other time that I was trying to find my records, she came to, we had a Positive Neutrality for Ireland campaign where we set up this campaign, and we got Petra to come. She was the first person to sign it at a press conference in Dublin, and she was only after coming from London, where she met with Prince Charles and Princess Diana at the time, and she was telling me about how interested they were in the German Greens. All they wanted to do was talk to Petra Kelly and talk about the German Greens, and she was like, it was amazing. She was an amazing woman, but the one thing we have to remember, especially in today's climate and what's going on in the world in relation to militarisation, and particularly within the European Union, which we're all a part of, she would, in my opinion, as I said, you cannot predict what would happen when you don't have, it's only guesswork. But I firmly believe she would have been on the side of those who are opposing the militarisation of Europe and opposing the funding of arms to whether it be the Russia-Ukraine conflict or whether it be the Israeli-Gaza. She would definitely be on the side of peace and disarmament and not on the side of what's happening now.
Thanks very much, Patricia. Just to kind of look back at the Irish connection of Petra Kelly, I did an article, and if anyone is interested, you can get a free copy of in this. There are 3 or 4 copies left, so they're for free. And that's 24 years ago, and I met Patricia, and I think I might have met you as well. I know this is 24 years ago, and at the time, so I wrote an article about this Petra Kelly and Ireland, and I was amazed. Everyone I asked was absolutely positive. There was no feeling of, well, there was a conflict, I think, with the German Greens or something. Everyone was absolutely supportive here in Ireland and said that Petra was an ongoing inspiration for them. What I found particularly interesting then with the research I did with that was that she was so well known in Ireland. There's, for example, a newspaper article. It's kind of quite a big one, and the heading is Petra's visit, an emotional occasion. You didn't need to say Petra Kelly. Petra's visit and her picture was all it took. She was really well known, and from the late 70s onwards with the kind of anti-nuclear movement where she was next to Christy Moore on the stage. So she had a real presence here. And someone even said to me, we thought she was Irish with kind of Petra Kelly. So that's about the Kelly family. Doris, what I wanted, and I will open to questions of, and even comments, because there are a number of experts in the audience, of course, as well. But I would want also to ask about a lot of the footage you have here, I think, is quite special, and the interview, especially with the brother. Do you want to say something on that?
Well, it was John Kelly, the brother, John Kelly Jr., because the father had the same name, her stepfather, John Kelly. So he never spoke about his sister since her death, since she was murdered, because he was in a kind of shock, because the media and everything jumped on the family. They tried to get stuff, and it was for him a horrible time. So now, with the help of Lukas Beckmann, and it take me 1 year, slowly interacting with him by email to persuade him to help me to make this film about his sister. And it was back and forward, because he's very shy, and it was for him a big step to support the film and to help me. With his help, I could use the material, the Super 8 material, about all these wonderful scenes with the family, because he is the last one of the family. His both parents, first the mother, then the father, died only a few years ago. So it was absolutely necessary to get him in the film, because I understand slowly the importance of the family, of her family, for her political work. So it would be a kind of naked film without a member of her family who helped me to tell this. Her grandmother died also years ago, or shortly after Petra being murdered. So this was, I was in last November invited to Doc New York, biggest documentary festival in the States, and John decided to come, and also Milo Yellowhair and Cora Weiss, so we had a kind of US premiere, and he really spoke, he told publicly, I am so glad that I did the step and help that this film could be possible. And it was amazing, because this is part of documentary work, not to destroy people, or, you know, they help you, they open their thoughts, their hearts and everything. So it's a big pressure, especially if you have to take care about your protagonists, and especially about somebody like John. And so for me, it's like circling around, and in November, hearing this out of his mouth, it was really touching. And he's so proud and so happy that he helped to bring Petra back to life, you know.
Yeah. And it does. It really does bring her back to life. And I think that is the beautiful achievement that you have created here. But I do want to, and I am conscious that in theory, in 10 minutes, we continue with the next item. But I would really love anyone who has a question, who wants to contribute something, to be able to do that. Ask a question. Edward, shall I?
Very brief glimpse of Heinrich in the footage. And can I ask you, how involved was Heinrich in the peace movement, and what was his relationship with Petra Kelly?
So Heinrich Böll, as far as I can say, he was very involved in the peace movement of the 80s, in this 1981 October big rally in Germany. He was one of the speakers, and it was very important to have him. I mean, this was a movement of many different wings and parts of the movement, but especially young, and to have him as a kind of moral institution backing the peace movement, he was very important. And the relation to Petra Kelly, she works also, or it was her idea to become a writer, and she produced, or finally it was 10 books more or less, and for her first book with the title To Think, in German it's mit dem Herzen denken,
Thinking with your heart.
Thinking with your heart, and the preface was written by Heinrich. So he introduced her. It was hard to find material, film material, because you know it's so many years ago, and in these times not everything was filmed as nowadays. So it's a hard time to find tiny pieces. And Heinrich Böll, in these years, he was, I think he was a very relevant part, not only of the peace movement, but to bring Petra's idea of civil disobedience to Germany. And both of them practiced it, you know. You've seen him with Petra in the film of this blockade, Mutlangen, in front of the American air base in Germany, to avoid the entrance of the Pershing II and missiles. And they sit in the front row. And for television, I mean, this was called the Promi, the VIP blockade, you can say in English, VIP blockade. So it helped a lot to bring this idea to Germany. And so both of them, Heinrich Böll and Petra Kelly, I think both of them had been very important part to make this possible. And nowadays, I mean, it starts again. We don't know exactly, but the new government and the new situation, they bring these old feelings in the beginning of the 80s that they want to attack and to calm down the NGOs and the civil society, civil movements, and so and to criminalize the young people, the Klimakleber, you know, who sits in the streets, and so this starts again, and I think the question of civil disobedience, it's again in the discussion.
And I think just one very quick, I think after his death, she was actually very critical of people who were not appreciating his legacy enough. So even within the Green Party, I thought that was very interesting. Sorry.
I just wanted to say that one of the few things, demonstrations I was ever at was up here at where the Shell Sea was having a demonstration, and I was slightly horrified because I was living there and I wasn't used to this. We stood there watching the lorries coming in being stopped, and the police were there, of course. And there was a woman beside me who had come all the way from Dublin. She looked like me, rather mousy and sort of elderly. Anyway, the two of us stood in front of this coach full of police in black uniforms, no identification, no caps, and they were waiting. I think there was something very special and rather awful. We were wondering what would happen if they came out. Were we supposed to stop them? But they didn't get out of us. But Maura Harrington from up there, was driving a little car towards the police cordon, and they got their batons out, and they walloped her car and broke the windscreen, and they dragged her out onto the street on her back. I was horrified.
Sounds like the example.
I thought it never would happen there. It did. And there were also other people being thermal flores and things, which I was told was rent a crowd, whatever that is.
Right.
Anyway, that was
Yeah.
just a local experience.
Yeah, no, thank you for that addition. Very briefly, and I think,
The very quick one, just to praise the family for their courage in contributing to the film, because this is a very difficult thing. In German, accusing somebody of Selbstmord, it sounds more harsh than suicide in some ways, but this was murder. And how to try and set the record right is very important. Second one is the Convention on Human Rights. Gotta have, there seems to be, it's like an optional kind of thing where we're retreating back to it. I think we should remind people that it's there for a purpose, to defend all people.
Yeah.
And lastly, one last one on this Wackershofen. They have never managed to successfully do nuclear reprocessing, ever. Never. When you go and ask about it, it's just never happened. They dump it into the sea in drums to get rid of it. So be under no illusions, there's a lot of management of information going on in the background.
yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much to everyone. I wish we had more time because it really would deserve more time, but fortunately we have more time over the weekend, and I would really encourage more conversations about Petra Kelly, her legacy. She had so many, and I think that was one of the fantastic things that came out. She was supporting, and she had so many different causes with a very international mindset. It wasn't a local one. It wasn't a very closed-in one. It was very international with very many causes and with a lot of passion, with amazing energy. And Doris, thanks again for bringing that to us.
Thank you.